Democratic nominee for president, Secretary Hillary Clinton, thank you so much for finding the time to talk to us in this whirlwind of a campaign.
I'm very happy to talk to you, Yonit.
Thank you. You know, obviously Israelis, I think, have been following this election as close as Americans have been, and this campaign is really remarkably extraordinary. Why do you think it's been, it's shaped up to be this extraordinary?
Well, our presidential campaigns in the last decades have all had a certain character, and a lot of them have gotten quite intense, and this is no exception to that. I think there are a couple of additional reasons. Certainly, we've never had a nominee for one of our two major parties like Donald Trump. What he has said, his divisiveness, his willingness to engage in bigotry and bluster and bullying, his alliance with hate groups, white supremacist groups, anti-Semitic groups, anti-women comments, his Islamophobia, negativity toward immigrants, the list goes on. So that has added an extra element of unpredictability and instability. So what I've tried to do is to chart a very steady course about what it is we need to do to get the economy working for everybody, not just those at the top, protect our country, stand with our friends and allies around the world, most particularly Israel, continue to lead the world with strength and steadiness, and unify our country.
I assume even your detractors would agree that you're knowledgeable and very experienced, and even Donald Trump supporters would say, he has markedly less political experience. On paper, shouldn't this race have been easier?
I never expected an easy race. If I were to be grossly generalistic, I'd say you can take Trump supporters and put them in two big baskets. There are what I call the deplorables, the racists and the haters and the people who are drawn because they think somehow he's going to restore an America that no longer exists. So just eliminate them from your thinking, because we've always had a kind of paranoid, prejudicial element within our politics. But there is a significant number of people who feel like nobody cares about them. Our business leaders don't care, our government leaders don't care, our political leaders say one thing, never produce results. And these people have a case to make and deserve to be listened to. I happen to think they are signing up with the wrong candidate, who's never produced anything for anybody else and has in fact taken bankruptcies, laid off and lost jobs for thousands of people, scam people, con people. We know the long list, but there's a level of fear and even anger that somehow it's not working. So you look at the Brexit vote, you look at the rise of far-right nationalistic parties and democracies. They are in response to people just wondering, can we keep this going, and can it benefit me and my family?
But I also want to focus on you. You said in an interview a few months ago with Vox, you said, it's always amusing to me that when I have a job, I have very high approval ratings, and when I seek a job, all the discredited negativity comes up. Why is that?
Oh, I've obviously thought about that a lot. I represent a very clear challenge to sort of the status quo, the stereotype of leadership, the challenge to vested power and forces that I don't think are always in the best interests of our country. So,
does gender play a role in that at all?
I think it does. I think you have to say that it does. I think Donald Trump said the other day that I don't look presidential. Well, he sees people through such a narrow lens. He looks at a judge and doesn't see a distinguished federal judge, but the son of Mexican immigrants. He looks at an anchor woman and thinks bimbo. He looks at a reporter with a disability and mocks him. So the only person he thinks looks presidential is the person he sees in the mirror every day.
Moving on to the Israeli-Palestinian
Yes.
conflict, and as you yourself know so well, every administration comes with the best of intentions, looking for that magical code to somehow move forward. And I wanted to ask you, if you were elected, maybe the U.S. needs a whole new approach on this, on managing the crisis instead of trying to solve it.
I think that's a very profound question, because some problems are solvable, others have to be managed. And of course, as my husband became president and shares a passion for Israel, forged such a deep personal relationship with Prime Minister Rabin, worked very hard with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Prime Minister Barak, at that time Yasser Arafat. I know the difficulty of bringing the parties to agreement, and I also know, and I say this everywhere, I know with the three leaders that I just met during my husband's presidency, each made concessions, each made offers that were not accepted. And then I watched as Sharon and Olmert and Netanyahu again reached out and tried. And you may recall, I went to Jerusalem to stand on the stage with Prime Minister Netanyahu around 10, 11 o'clock at night to announce the unprecedented decision by the Israeli government to impose a settlement freeze. Was it on everything? No. But it was predominantly in the West Bank. It was real. It gave us a 10-month window to try to hammer out a lot of these very difficult questions of borders and security and all the other issues that have been bubbling about. And there were problems on the Palestinian side, some of which were of their own making and some of which were frankly caused by others. And the settlement freeze was not extended.
Let's talk, if we might, about the relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. You would be coming on the heels of a well-publicized, contentious political, let's say, personal relationship between the two leaders. How would that work between you and him?
Well, I would start by saying that I think the headlines may be much more tantalizing than the reality of the current relationship. I honestly believe no administration has done more for the security of Israel than the Obama administration. I was proud to be a part of that. I stood up for Israel in the UN. I stood against boycott, divestment, and sanctions. I have said that shortly after being inaugurated, I would invite the Prime Minister to Washington for meetings. I would send my joint chiefs and intelligence experts to Israel to meet with their counterparts. What we need to do first and foremost to be sure that the qualitative military edge is unmatched.
You know, when policy is the issue, Donald Trump says, for example, Israelis should keep building in the West Bank. He promises never to drag them into a peace plan they don't want. He points to the fact that you called for a settlement freeze at the beginning of your tenure. Many Israelis could look at that and say, hey, that's more tempting.
Well, it depends upon what day he's talking. He has said that we should be neutral toward Israel on Monday. And then on Tuesday, he has said that, he's really supportive of Israel. On Wednesday, he might say Israel should pay back the defense aid it's received over the years. I mean, there is no rhyme, no reason to his comments about Israel. The best I can tell his only experience is marching in the Fifth Avenue Israel Day parade. So I find him a very untrustworthy spokesperson about where he stands. Using nukes against ISIS, not caring whether other countries in the region, including Saudi Arabia, get nuclear weapons. How does that in any way help Israel? Giving a full carte blanche to Putin to do whatever he seems to want to do right on Israel's doorstep. not knowing the difference between Hezbollah and Hamas, and at one point, basically being quite ignorant of Iranian involvement in Syria.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the global challenges, but one more question about the Middle East. And, President Clinton is so well respected and loved. And this morning, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic suggested you should appoint him, I mean, maybe this is premature, but as a special envoy or super negotiator. Would you entertain that notion?
Look, I think my husband is an extraordinary presence on so many levels, and I'm not going to be making any appointments to anything during this campaign, but I have said repeatedly, I think it's a great advantage for me to have the benefit of his experience and expertise, because he has a proven track record of bringing people together. So we'll wait and see if I have the opportunity to actually address some of these.
That would be something we
these great challenges that we face.
That would be an interesting thing if you become president. Former First Lady becoming president, former president becoming, what is this? First spouse, first gentleman.
Yes, well, everybody's trying to come up with the name.
The new terminology. You mentioned Iran. You talked about the global challenges. The negotiations began under your tenure,
right,
and you laid down very strict ground rules. Donald Trump recently, this week, said he attacked it so much, the deal so much, that he went as far as saying that the result of the nuclear deal with Iran is going to destroy Israel unless I'm president.
Right. Well,
his words, not mine.
Yes, I know they're his words, and they are the top lines that he's fed to say. I believe with all my heart that putting a lid on Iran's nuclear weapons program has made Israel safer, has made the region safer, prevented a nuclear arms race that would have included not only all the Gulf states, but maybe Egypt. The fact that we were able to reach an agreement on the nuclear program does not in any way excuse the behavior that Iran is still engaging in. I have made it clear that with respect to the agreement, my approach is distrust and verify. We have some very good, new, unprecedented tools to do just that. I will hold them to every single element of the agreement that they have reached, because I think that we've got to prevent them returning from any covert activities, and as things stand now, I believe that we are in a position to do that. I would rather be dealing with Iran's continuing aggressive behavior without them being weeks away from breakout, which is where they were. And I would say to all of my friends in Israel that Iran was able to master the nuclear fuel cycle, build covert facilities, and stack them with centrifuges when George W. Bush was president. When Obama came in and I accepted to be Secretary of State, we faced the very real potential of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. That's why I spent the first 2 years of my tenure putting together an international coalition to impose the sanctions that drove them to the negotiating table, which finally led to the agreement. But we have to go after any violations on ballistic missiles. We've got to work much harder to contain the threat that they continue to pose because of their very aggressive support of terrorism, whether it is Hezbollah, Hamas, or Houthis in Yemen and anywhere else in the world. But we are in a stronger position than we would have been to deal with this other malicious behavior because of the nuclear agreement.
Madam Secretary, you spoke about the xenophobia and the atmosphere right now around this election. The atmosphere recently led Yuval Rabin, Yitzhak Rabin's son, to say that it reminds him of what he heard in Israel before his father was assassinated. Are you concerned that this violent rhetoric might translate into violent action against you or against anyone else?
Well, I certainly am concerned because of the very explicit incitement to violence that has been a part of the Trump campaign from the very beginning. At a lot of his big rallies during his primary campaign, there was encouragement of violence. He was offering to pay legal fees for those in the audience who were attacking protesters that were in their midst. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to allow it to fester.
Can it turn into violence?
Well, I despise the association Trump has. He retweets a white supremacist who writes under the handle white genocide. He puts the man in charge of the Breitbart site, which traffics in conspiracy theories and really tries to create an emotional atmosphere in which people feel somehow aggrieved, and they are told to take it out on immigrants, take it out on African Americans, take it out on Jewish people, take it out on women, take it out on somebody. And it is a toxic brew. But I'm also not going to be bullied or intimidated by the kind of rhetoric and demagoguery coming from the Trump campaign.
You know, obviously we've been talking a lot about foreign policy, and one of the things you will be dealing with if elected is the war against ISIS. What will you do differently? Will, for example, you use the term war on radical Islam? It's been, you know, an issue that in Israel has been raised. Why isn't the term used in American politics right now?
Well, we've made a judgment based on a lot of research that bringing Islam into the definition of our enemy actually serves the purpose of the radical jihadists, and there's a lot of evidence of that. An article just today by Matt Olson, the former director of our National Counterterrorism Center, makes this point, where he quoted ISIS spokespeople rooting for Donald Trump's victory because Trump has made Islam and Muslims part of his campaign. And basically, the jihadists see this as a great gift. They are saying, oh, please, Allah, make Trump president of America. So I'm not interested in giving aid and comfort to their evil ambitions. I want to defeat them. I want to end their reign of terror.
How?
I don't want them to feel as though they can be getting more recruits because of our politics. So we're going to intensify our air campaign, more support on the ground to the Arab and Kurdish fighters, pushing ISIS toward the Syrian border and pushing them out of Raqqa toward the Iraqi border. We have got to specifically target Baghdadi. We need to go after the head, just like we finally got bin Laden. I still believe we need leverage to deal with the Russians and the Iranians and the Syrians, whether it's a no-fly zone or some other tool
and to
that
be
tries.
more aggressive with Putin, that has become an indispensable.
Well, I think we need leverage with Putin. So we've made progress, but it's not enough, and I'm not satisfied.
We're winding down our conversation. Obviously, you're very busy these days, and there's a lot we would still love to talk about. But I want to ask you, Madam Secretary, we must say that many countries around the world have already had women leaders, including Israel. Can I ask you why you think this took the United States so long to get to this point?
I think our political system is much more difficult for anyone to be elected president. I think about Golda Meir, I think about Indira Gandhi, I think about Angela Merkel, Margaret Thatcher, others whom I could name. And I think it's hard for anybody, but given the rough and tumble contact sport that it is in America, it is even more challenging for a woman to start, to get through it, and then, as I've been so fortunate, to be nominated. I feel good about our campaign, but I'm going to work my heart out. We have no illusions about the unpredictable events in the world that could influence this election and the unpredictable candidate that I'm running against. So I feel like I am in a good position, but I'm not taking anything or anybody for granted.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much for this interview again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yonita. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.